Hello all, this is John Fariso. I first met Matt at a meeting of Society of Professional Investigators. As I listened to his episodes of PI Perspectives, other guests were answering the very questions that I was looking for. PI Perspectives provides a wealth of information. Thank you, Matt.
The Campbell Group offers best-in-the-industry pricing, service, and coverage for private investigators. With more than 25 years of experience in the industry and over 3,000 PIs insured nationally, the Campbell team has the expertise to make sure you have the coverage you need. Submit an application and receive a quote within 24 hours. Let them know you're a PI Perspectives listener on your application for $50 off your yearly premium. Are you an investigative professional with an international problem you can't solve? Conflict International has the knowledge and relationships to jump in for you. We compensate investigators for referring cases to our office. Contact us today for details. Conflict International uses insight, intelligence, investigation, risk management, and strategic solutions to solve problems troubling individuals and companies of all kinds, anywhere around the world. Whether you're planning to hire a person to a position of trust, carry out due diligence on a company, trace hidden assets, or require skilled boots on the ground, Conflict International investigators can seamlessly pursue a case across borders, offering a truly global solution. Find out about our extensive range of services at conflictinternational.com. Conflict International, global reach, international knowledge. Welcome to this week's episode of PI Perspectives. Today, we are exploring a new topic. How many of you are interested in writing a blog or writing for a magazine? Today's guest is Scott Fulmer. Scott's a well-known blogger, contributor for PI Magazine, and author of Confessions of a Private Investigator. Scott and Matt discuss what it takes to become an effective writer for the investigative industry. Please welcome Scott Fulmer and your host, New York Private Investigator, Matt Spaier.
And welcome everyone to this week's episode of PI Perspectives. This is Matt Spaier, your host. Today we welcome back one of my favorite guests, somebody who is a fellow podcaster, and I love chatting with this dude. So Scott Fulmer, I want to welcome you back to the program.
Hey, thanks, Matt. It's great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you, man. So going way back to the Intermountain PI, you had a podcast going for a while, and I think you started around the time that I started, and we've had some good chats over the time. You're now in Texas, and Resolutus Investigations is your company, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's right. Based out of San Antonio.
Awesome. So we've talked shop a bunch of times, right? We've talked about doing surveillances and doing all different types of investigative work. But I asked you to come on today to talk about something a little bit different. I thought it'd be super interesting. Those of you who know who Scott is and have seen him around know that he likes to blog, and he writes for different trade magazines out there. And I wanted to discuss like what it takes to do that kind of writing. If you have a passion for it, you've ever thought like, hey, how do you get picked to do this, or what is this about? Like, I wanted to have that discussion today. So who better to ask than Scott Fulmer? So let's dive in. You wrote a book, so let's talk about that first.
Okay. Yeah, it's called Confessions of a Private Eye. And interestingly, the genesis of my book was in blogging. I began blogging a long time ago, 2010, somewhere in that time frame. Mm-hmm. And I would blog about specific cases, or, obviously everything was changed due to privacy issues, but I'd talk about methods or processes or, certain methodologies that private investigators have or should have. And some of it I used examples from cases that I had in the blog. And then I think it was flying to California to work on a case, and I ended up talking to somebody next to me, and they said, you should write a book. Yeah. And I had several people, you should write a book. It's a lot easier to say that than it is to do it. It's, I mean, I don't want to, it's probably the closest to childbirth that I'll ever experience is trying to write a book. The worst part about it is you edit it, and you have to read it and read it again and again to make sure that it flows, to make sure that you're not introducing a story or a case that you have already introduced in the past, and make sure it has a certain continuity. So by the time I was through, it took me about a year to write it, and by the time I was through, I was pretty much sick of it. I didn't want to read it or see it anymore.
Right.
But it's called Confessions of a Private Eye. It's available at Amazon, and it's out in paperback, trade paper, and it's actually out in hardback now as well.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely put a link to all that stuff in the show notes. Yeah, I mean, I've had that happen already a few times where people have said, "Wow, you should really write about what you do," or write a book. I've had you get these solicitations online too, right? Oh, so and so publishing company, we're interested in having you write a book. Okay, so what does that look like? Usually they'll offer to write it for you, they'll offer to publish it for you, and you have no really skin in the game. It's literally, you make no money on it. It seems like a scam to me at times to do this, but there are definitely folks out there. What do you know about that kind of stuff?
That's interesting. Yeah, you're right. And they own the rights to it, which means if for some reason it does very well, or it's turned into a movie and Brad Pitt plays you, the host of PI Perspectives is Brad Pitt, then you don't see a dime from that. So yeah, if it gets to that point, you really want to get an entertainment lawyer. I'm not at that point. You'd have to talk to some of these other authors like Kelly Riddle or John Hoda, who have written a lot. But I do find it interesting that so many private investigators who don't like writing reports, I'm one of them,
Exactly.
enjoys writing. In Kelly's case, it's a lot of fiction as well as nonfiction. In John's case, it's fiction. In my case, it's nonfiction. But it's just I think it's just in our genes.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's when you're sitting there hours and hours and hours doing surveillance, your mind wanders, right? You come up with ideas. And obviously I wouldn't recommend writing and surveying at the same time. That's kind of defeats the purpose of doing surveillance.
Bad things happen.
Yeah, definitely bad things happen when you're not paying attention. Yeah, it's super interesting, and like you come across it, and I had, like I said, I've been approached a few times, and the most I've done is I've written a chapter for a book, for a textbook at John Jay College. Chelsea Binns had a collection of I think about 15 of us. And it was a huge honor, and when she contacted me, like I wasn't the first choice. They went through their first rounds, her and Bruce Sackman, and they had picked some people. And for whatever reason, the particular chapter that I ended up writing, the person who was supposed to do it either couldn't do it or didn't do it well enough or whatever. And like they got back to me with very little time. They're like, 8,000 words, and you've got like 2 weeks to get it in. And I'm like,
along with everything else you're doing, yeah.
Challenge accepted, right? So I did my best to get in, and I got together, and then you got to be prepared for criticism, because then I started getting the red lines from editors, and I'm like, well, wait a second, no, this is my story, this is what I want to do here. How dare you tell me it's like not good enough, or how dare you say you got to change this or do that, right? So it's like you got to check your pride at the door too, and have faith in your editor and all that. And I went and I reworked it. Essentially what it came down to is like, hey, this is too much of a sales pitch. We're trying to do a textbook here, and like you're not trying to market satellite investigations, right? So that was a challenge, but it was very cool for sure.
Well, I mean, anyone who knows anything about criminal justice, John Jay is probably the most prestigious university that, in terms of research in that field. Maybe Sam Houston State University in Huntsville, Texas, is another one. But those are really the top. So my hat's, if I had a hat on, it would be off to you. That's
Yeah.
I could be included in that.
Yeah, it was a huge honor. It was a huge honor to go back there. I've taught there a few times too, which is just mind blowing, right? Here's somebody who went
That's
there.
your alma mater.
Yeah, I graduated and I got asked to come back and be a guest adjunct for a couple of classes, which is amazing. I mean, I think we love being teachers, investigators. For some reason, we just love sharing what we do with people. It's kind of in our nature. So.
No, I agree. I agree. In fact, I'm teaching this summer. I'll be teaching a continuing education class. It's an adult and community education class here in San Antonio called Private Investigator 101. Just an idea to explain to individuals that are interested in the field how to become a private investigator in Texas. The licensing aspect, as well as what you can, what to do, what you can expect, and a lot of that, my drive behind, I do enjoy teaching, as you mentioned, but a lot of the drive behind that was I didn't get any help. Before, I mean, you came along at a golden time, I think. When I came along, there were no podcasts, no blogs, no internet. Yeah, I'm that old. No email, no news lists.
Did you send a Raven?
Yeah, nobody. And
Send a Raven.
Back in the day when nobody wanted to share anything either.
Right.
It was still my business. So yeah, I don't want. There's enough. Rising tide lifts all boats. I think there's enough business for all of us.
Oh, that's a John Hoda quote. Shame on you. Shout out to John. It's great. Just trying to understand too. So it's like you get that approach, right? Or you start writing and somebody says, compilation of everything that you've written could be a book. Because that's the point where I'm at, right? I've written so much content, for PI Magazine. I wrote for them for 3 years. And then I got to the point with them, I was like, I got to give somebody else a chance, right? There's only so many pages in this magazine, and I have occupied, 2 of them for every issue for the past 3 years, right? Or 3 of them, whatever. And I'm like, it's time for somebody else to have a voice, right? But I do have this compilation of all different stuff I've written about. I have, the chapter for the one book. I have I've written for Psychology Today, and that was another one where I got a humbling from the editor, and then I had somebody who actually is an accomplished writer take a look at it and kind of help me punch it up a little bit. And I submitted it again, and they're like, well, I was like, no, so-and-so said it's okay. This is going to work. So they're like, okay.
I remember reading your last article in PI Magazine, and you were basically saying just what you said now. I've said enough. It's time for somebody else to go with the reins. And that's good. I mean, there's only so much that can be said about surveillance or podcasts.
Yeah.
Unless the technology changes or things, to that nature.
Well, yeah. And the thing is perspectives, right? So you got 3 years worth of my views on things, and there's so many great minds in this industry. There's so many great people that have a voice or have something to say. So, giving that person the opportunity to do that, I think is really important. It's not all about me. It's not all about you. It's about the industry and trends. And I think that's something that I love about your blog so much, Scott, is that, you really talk about trends. You really talk about, things that are out there, and you make it relatable and easy to read. And it's just, it's enjoyable because you actually get something out of it, which is so important. You're investing time in reading something. You want to get something out of it, right?
Well, and there's enough. I mean, there's really enough to go. There's too much TV, too many books. You just can't. You only have so much time in the day, so you have to really be picky about what where you put your time. And so, with my blog, I have tried to keep it brief and keep it on point, and just try to make some kind of a point each week that will get people, scratching their head or thinking about, or something to that effect.
Well, even content wise for me, for podcasts, right? So I've got over 200 episodes. I think I'm close to actually 225 wow. Between the regular episodes and the little quick hits I used to do. So So it's like, okay, what am I going to talk about now? Like, I've covered a lot of material. I've talked to a lot of people. At what point do I start recycling guests? Is that okay to recycle guests? I think it's okay to recycle guests if they're good guests.
I agree.
If they're crappy guests, don't recycle. But I could probably count on one hand the amount of times I struggled to get an interview done with somebody because there's so many good people out there and there's so much good stuff to talk about. But just understanding. So anytime there's like a new fad, like I just did one with Scott Walker on ChatGPT. Amazing, right? I didn't know anything about that. I heard the buzzwords. I didn't really look into it, but then the more and more I looked into it and saw how it was relatable to investigations, I was like, okay, this is very cool. This is really, really cool. So, that was a fun one to record. So like, as these new topics come in, these are things to write about, right? What am I going to blog about, right? Right. That's always a question too. So what would you suggest on somebody who wants to write a blog? They're an investigator. They want to write a blog. What should they talk about?
Well, they say that Hemingway only wrote about stuff that he knew, being in the war, bullfighting, fishing. Those were things that he was involved with, and they're all central features of his greatest novels. Sorry, I'm a Hemingway fan. So I'd say write about what you know. If your focus is domestic investigations, then write about that. I mean, there's a whole facet that you can impart to other people in this business about it. You'd be surprised. There are many private investigators that do not do surveillance, that have never done a domestic case, or they don't do fraud, or they don't do corporate investigations. And so it's always interesting to read something about those types of subjects. But I would just say write about what you know. Where do you start? You start at the beginning. Just sit down, and you got to start somewhere. Sit down and write a short blog post, and it'll build upon itself, and it may change too over time as you do it.
Yeah, and definitely having some sort of outline or format, right? And that's always good. A beginning, a middle, and an end is helpful. Stick to your point.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times you'll do a podcast or you do a blog, and about 10 posts or 10 episodes into it, you're thinking, maybe I should kind of have an outline, and maybe I should plan, focus it as a certain way so that it's, but they're very similar, like the podcast. If you Francie's podcast, PIs Declassified.
Sure.
You remember Paul Jabes, the American Private Investigator?
I love that podcast.
Yeah, one of my favorites.
Yeah, actually, his format, his style, I got borrowed a lot from that. Paul, like I was really consuming a lot of that material before I started, and I was like, I like this, man. I like this hangout vibe that he's got. Just two guys chatting. Just casual, and it's funny because sometimes I get people that guess, and they're like, okay, so just give me questions. No, what are we going to talk about? I don't know. I mean, I kind of know what I'm going to talk about, but the second you handcuff me to questions, or second you're locking me down to topics, like that's handcuffing a whole bunch of content that could potentially come out that could be very helpful. So, I equate it to, like I'm a child of the 80s, but 90s as well with Seinfeld. It's like a show about nothing. Well, this is a show about nothing. We just come on, we're going to talk, and it's like we're having coffee, just chilling, talking about what we do.
I mean, you're George Costanza with the.
I do have it. Yes. I've done my. That's it. I'm out. I could twirl an umbrella.
That's okay. I do have beard envy. You've got a really great goatee going there with the beard on the side. So I do envy you there.
Yeah, all my hair went from the top of my head to my face, so it's all good. It's got to go somewhere.
Right.
We're going to take a quick break here. And when we come back, we're just going to keep hammering down on this stuff. It's such an interesting topic, and just really off the beaten path for the everyday investigator. But I think it's a lot of things that we think about. We don't really talk about it, but we think about it, and we wonder, hey, can I do this? Or I want to do this, and how do I get started? So everybody sit tight, and we'll be right back.
Check out the PI Institute of Education at piinstitute.com. Since 1989, Kelly Riddle has been teaching on subjects such as surveillance, nursing home investigations, insurance fraud, domestic investigations, hidden assets, and accident scene investigations. The PI Institute of Education is a featured learning partner in the investigatorstoolbox.com. So check out the free content on the site, then visit the Institute for more great savings on additional classes. Are you an investigator that can't find the time for research, or are you stuck on a case that is giving you issues? Satellite Investigations has a dedicated research team that specializes in skip tracing and defendant locates. Let our expert researchers use a balanced technique of research and pretext know-how to authenticate data and get you the answers you need. Contact us today by emailing us at newcase@satellitepi.com. Do you enjoy our podcast and the guests we bring you? Since 2019, Matt and his team have done their very best to give you amazing shows each week. If you feel like our show has helped you to be a better investigator, or maybe even inspired you to become an investigator, please let us know. We're looking for testimonials. Drop Matt an email with a recorded 20 to 30 seconds of you talking about this podcast. You can also email him something verbal about the website. His email is matthew.s@satellitepi.com. And if you really feel blessed for having this content, consider supporting Matt and our show by joining Investigators Toolbox. You really have to see version 2.0. And at just 49 cents a day, it's a no-brainer. Now let's jump in to this week's episode.
And welcome back to PI Perspectives. This is Matt Spaier, your host. Today I'm here with kind of a co-host, I guess, today for today's show, Scott Fulmer. Scott, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, we're old school veterans when it comes to this stuff. Oh man, always easy to chat. So we've been talking about blogging, we've been talking about writing books, and what that looks like and how you get into it. And one of the things I always thought about or wondered about, you were talking fiction, nonfiction, right? How do you make that decision as to what do you want to write about? Like, is it more of like a passion thing, or is it more of like what comes easier to you?
I think it's a combination of both. It really, everybody has a story to tell, and it depends on what story you want to tell. I mentioned in the last segment, I mentioned Kelly Riddle. He started out with nonfiction,
Yes,
and now he writes fiction.
right.
And I think that with fiction, at least my experience with writing nonfiction was cathartic for me. I suppose fiction can be the same way, but to be able to put stuff on paper and kind of get these stories or these things out of you, it feels good. It's kind of it's a mental exercise. So I think it really just depends on what you want to do and what you want to say. Many of the PIs that I know that write do both. They do fiction and nonfiction.
Right.
I have dealt with just nonfiction, so I guess it really just depends on what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going back to the whole teacher thing. I love to talk about how to. I think there's always room for more how to in a trade industry. And it's important that that content is out there, especially if you know what you're talking about. If you don't know what you're talking about, that can be a problem. But it's good to share. It feels good to share. And one of the things I love to do also is like conferences, right? If I'm speaking about a particular subject, is not being one-sided, right? So when you have that, hey, I'm doing a presentation on this, you realize who you're talking to, right? I'm talking to people like Scott Fulmer that do exactly the same thing that I do. How would I even pretend to know more about this particular subject than my audience? So how about I solicit their opinions on things or solicit discussion? So whenever I'm preparing a chat, I'm always leaving that room to talk, because I cannot pretend to know everything about everything. I have a certain way of doing things. I'm talking about certain things, but having that room for discussion, it lends to the success of the teaching, because you've got other people that have good quality input. They wouldn't be in the room if they didn't know what they were doing, right?
No, I agree, and I think that kind of an analogy of that is, as we operate, most private investigation firms are very small. They're mom and pop firms, maybe 1 to 5 individuals, 1 or 2, maybe 4 or 5 individuals, and it's easy with work every day to get this insular way of looking at things with blinders on, and then you go to a conference, and wow, it's like you're in Candyland. I mean, there's all these other private investigators, people who have been in the business way longer than you, or who are brand new, and everybody has a different perspective. Everybody has something to offer, and it's great. It's a great approach to do it that way, and to learn from each other. But I like that.
Yeah, and just take it one step further, the ability to have content out there and everybody learning from one another. That's why blogs are so important. The whole concept of doing that. I'm just gonna write about this one subject that I think people need to know about. And to me, like, that's I almost get more from that than I do from books. Because like that's now a commitment. And I'm a terrible reader. I'll be the first to admit it. Like my brain goes off in that direction. I'm an audiobook guy. Yeah, like you're saying, audio. Like that's, and even then, sometimes like I'm listening, I'm going, okay, pay attention. What did he just say? You like pay attention. Like I have to focus on paying attention.
Because I was spaced out thinking about something else. So yeah, no, right. I get that.
And it's like I'm driving and I'm just like, I'm thinking about the work that I have to do. I'm listening, but I'm not really listening. If you give me a test, I'm screwed. Because just like kind of paying attention, but not really.
No, I understand. But and to further that, the point you were making earlier, when I started in this business, like I said, private investigators, there are very few databases as well at that time. And so everybody was pretty much holding everything close to the vest. They didn't want to share their tips or their tricks to the trade, and how they go about doing things. And I think that things like sharing and the blogs and the podcasts and the conferences, they really make us better investigators. They raise the industry considerably.
Yeah, I mean, learning about new technology, learning other ways of doing things, networking for coverage, like, hey, I don't specialize in this, but this person does. Okay, well, now I know somebody, or I need something in this particular state. Well, now I know this person out in this state, and I've personally met them and I've spent time with them, and I know their character of who that person is. And yes, I can trust them to do the work product. I mean, that's all super important stuff to realize and get down and understand. Those are the benefits, right? It's worth spending the money to get there and do that. It's worth spending the time to read the content that's out there, and doing that. And we all have stories. We all have stories on investigating. We all have stories on how to do things. I think what you said earlier about finding your passion, and that's a great tip, man. Just really understanding what it takes to do that. And there are people that or publishers that are looking for content. Like if you want to write for PI Magazine, contact PI Magazine and say, hey, I'm interested in writing for you. They don't know who you are until you tell them who you are. And chances are, they'll let you write something. I know the first article,
right.
the first article I had, that's what I did. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of these organizations, they're looking for people to contribute. They need people to contribute to write and to podcast or to blog or whatever the organization is. And so they're always looking for different voices. I started writing for PI Magazine last year. I think I've written a total of about 3 articles so far, and they're all related to domestic investigations, which is primarily what I do.
Right.
So yeah, I try to learn. The good thing about PI Magazine, just to put a plug in, is you read the magazine and there's 20 different topics about 100 different things. And so you really learn a lot from each magazine.
No, it's a must-have if you're in the industry. I mean, you just even just to peruse through and just see what are the trends, what's going on in the industry, staying on top of things.
Right.
It's super important. I mean, even contacting your own state association. Hey, I'd like to write something and get it out there. They're not going to say no. It's got to be credible content, related to the industry, but they're not going to say no. They're going to need some. I just saw something today from Nally. Hey, we're putting out 4 newsletters a year. They're looking for sponsorship, but they're also looking for content. So if you're interested in doing this, if you're interested in getting it, like the ability to get content out there is there, and then you have your own website, right? I know your website, you have your own blogs on there. Like, that's where you house everything, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
yeah,
it's always a place.
Yeah. So that, I mean, obviously we want more business because although we are altruistic human beings, you and I, we have to pay bills and dental bills and things like that. And so everything that I do is focused on, some of it's on giving back, but most of it's on, making money. Now, a blog doesn't make me any money, but hopefully it puts my name out there so that if someone needs an investigator in Texas, they call me. And so that's kind of one of the reasons that I do that. But you're right, there's lots of opportunities. There's newsletters. Most of the larger private investigator associations like Tally have their own magazine or their own newsletter.
Sure.
And so they're always looking for content. There's speakers at conferences. They're always calling for speakers, calling for papers. And it's all basically you and I. It's the members of the industry that come together and offer that. So it's nice to see different faces and not the same faces all the time, and have different perspectives. For example, a female investigator that does surveillance is going to have a different perspective about things than a male.
Oh, 100%.
Right. A African American private investigator that works criminal defense probably going to have a little bit of a different perspective than a white male that does that. And I don't want to get into the whole diversity thing. I'm just saying that there are all kinds of different voices out there that are valued and valuable.
Yeah, I mean, our industry is full of many different voices, and it's interesting, even just topic wise, right? Somebody can write on a certain topic that you are not proficient in, and now you've learned more about it, and vice versa. So it's the ability to crowdsource, your content is there. It's at your fingertips. And that's the beautiful thing about the internet, and just the ability to get this out. I mean, we were joking before the internet, send a raven and all that, but it's like you wonder, like, how did people get information across, right? How did people?
I have no idea, man. I remember, I think it was CompuServe, if you remember them, they had the first email addresses, and it was actually like a number, like 37 at CompuServe or whatever. I never had one of those, but of course, everybody and their mother had the was it Yahoo that put the discs in the magazines back in the day?
AOL. AOL
Yahoo
always had those discs.
AOL, that's right.
AOL.
That's right. Yeah. Everybody had an AOL email address, but I don't know how I got up on that topic. But yeah, no, I understand.
I still have an AOL address. It's a sore topic. I'm trying to get rid of it. I'm actually sunsetting finally 20 years later. I'm sunsetting the AOL address.
You're aging yourself with the AOL address.
I am. Sure. Listen, the bald head and gray hair on the beard I'm not fooling anybody. It's not just for men over here. It's definitely not going
right.
The
other thing I would say that I would add to that is, as you know, because you've been to a lot of conferences and there's a lot of egos in this business. A lot of people that tell you it's their way or the highway, or there's only one way to do things. And so it's nice. So if you're writing articles, you are going to have people that may hurt your pride, that may disagree or make comments that they don't agree with you, and that's okay.
Yeah, if it's respectful, that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, more if it is respectful, sure. But more than one perspective is certainly allowed.
100%. Yeah. I can't pretend to know everything about everything. And it's healthy discussion is great too. So even like roundtables and panels and things I love stuff like that. It's just being able to get those different ideas out there. I think the episodes of PI Perspectives that do the best are the ones that are roundtables. Just because folks are just really interested in that back and forth between people. So I enjoy.
Yeah, no. And I would say, going back to the American Private Investigator, the American PI, which was Paul, Minnesota Private Investigator Paul J. But for those who don't know him, been in the industry a long time. Also a bald guy too, by the way.
Yes,
but anyway,
join the club.
I have my hair. I guess maybe I'm. Anyway.
There you go. I don't know, we're seeing a little bit there, buddy.
Starting to come right. Back. He would have an annual surveillance roundtable on his podcast once a year.
Yeah.
And at the end of I think end of most of his episodes, he would be joined by one or two other people, and they would just talk about the industry. And I remember one time they were talking, and they asked, what's the new trend? He would say, what's going to be the next trend in the private investigation industry? And somebody said drones. And then they all laughed because it was really premature for that. Yeah. But it turned out whoever said that was very prescient, because drones are being used and they're all over the place. So
there you go.
But yeah, definitely the more voices, the better.
I used to love Alan Goodman. Alan was my guy.
Yeah. From the Rocky Coast of Maine. Yeah,
and like eventually I actually used Alan on some cases, and I called him up. I'm like, hey, you don't know who I am? I'm a fanboy. I just really love listening to you, and
he was kind of a curmudgeonly guy, but I got the feeling it'd be easy to get on his bad side real quickly. But I did enjoy everything he said.
Yeah, and he was like a chef or something too, which was like completely bizarre. I remember I was talking to him about that. Just a really, really cool guy. I like that one a lot. Yeah, I've talked to Paul every now and then. I think probably the last time I talked to him was maybe about 6 months ago. And just a pioneer in doing the podcasting. He does have content out now. It's a little bit different. It's more targeted. I think it's like J2 Risk, I think is what it's called. He's still doing his thing. But there are just so many resources that are out there. And it was interesting to see, the wave in 2019 of content blogs and podcasts and things like that. How it just came up, and then it's like all of a sudden it's back down again, and there's not as much content as there used to be. Obviously COVID had a lot to do with that. People had time on their hands, and now they don't. So it's interesting to see who's still standing and what's still around, right?
Well, yeah, and I would. Well, speaking of that, I mean, if you show me 10 podcasts, I'll show you 7 that are no longer active.
Yeah.
Starting a podcast is easy, but as you know, doing it, and even doing it weekly, and trying to do it to where you provide a quality product, it's a part-time job. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. You've got to find guests. You've got to find content. You have to come up with questions, because, as you know, a lot of people that you will interview are really bad on the interviews. So how did you become a PI? My dad was one, so I became one. And you've got to really draw it out of them. But as a PI, that's our job, to do that.
So you get two. You get those folks, right, who don't really give you much, right? They're giving you one word answers. And then you get the other folks that, you can't get a word in edgewise, because that's happened a few times too.
Yeah, I don't like that either.
Yeah. You just understand what you're dealing with. You just lean back. Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, great.
One of my favorite podcasts, and you'll know who this is because you've interviewed her. Is not even a private investigation podcast. Can I say that? Probably one of my favorite is Jerry Williams. FBI retired case file review with Jerry Williams.
Yep.
And she is a perfect host. If you listen to her, she doesn't interrupt. You don't hear her eating or hear the keyboard or whatever in the background. And she has prepared the guests, and it does help to have retired FBI agents telling you about their exciting histories or stories or cases they were involved in. So that does help. But she's I just love her podcast, which is a good example of a good one.
Yeah, definitely a great one. Jerry's a good friend, and the content is always amazing. I mean, and she's up there with episodes too. I think she's around 300, maybe more.
Yeah, I think she's approaching 300, if not more. And I think she mentioned the other day that she's retired. Obviously, she mentioned that she won't be doing this forever. And like, please don't say that. I want to keep hearing these stories.
And live on forever, and you just start recycling. I mean, there's so much good content on there. I've actually gotten a couple guests off of some of her episodes where I'll just reach out and say, hey, I'd like to interview you on my show. That's happened a few times. I obviously have had Jerry on, which is amazing. We do share some friends too, which is kind of cool. So, I think we're good here. I think we're going to wind down. I would just be encouraged, in trying to encourage those, that if you have the passion for it, just focus on what you want to do and just take a chance. Like, just get the content out there. The other thing I would say is consistency. If you're going to do it, be consistent with it, and understand that there are opportunities for everybody to do this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the only way to begin is just to begin. Just start writing. Just start podcasting. Will it stink at the beginning? Probably, but you'll get better at it. Just start blogging, whatever it takes. And if it's something that you have a passion for or it really feels good, then continue do it. If it's something that's a chore, then no, you shouldn't be doing it. Yeah. But we need more voices.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming on. This was great, and love having this chat. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week on the next episode. Take care, everyone.
This was a fun episode, and it's great to hear two creative guys talking shop. We hope you enjoyed it. Thanks to Campbell Insurance Group for sponsoring our show. Remember to tell them that you listen to PI Perspectives to save $50 when you apply for insurance. And thanks also to PI Institute for Education, Conflict International, and Satellite Investigations for sponsoring our show. Make sure you contact Satellite if you need help with any skip tracing needs. Also, don't forget about investigatorstoolbox.com. You can type in version 2.0, 25% to save $50 when you join. If you have a question or a comment about the show, email Matt at matthews@satellitepi.com, and you can find him on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook too. We'd like your feedback to bring you the best shows possible. And we'll be back next week with a brand new show. So make sure you tune in and stay safe out there.